Welcome to Hofstra University. My name is Susan Koser, and I have the honor of serving as the president of Hofstra University. I came running over a little while ago after a senior day at our final men's basketball game of the season, so lots going on today. So it's a university with a long history of community and government engagement. We are always happy to have our elected officials and our community members on our campus. So I was delighted when Congresswoman Gillen asked us to host today's event. I want to thank Congresswoman Gillen, Laura Gillen, and Congressman Suozzi for being here, and for the other members of our Long Island community for participating as well. They will all be introduced shortly. So there is a lot to discuss today, a lot to show you, and so I will now hand this over to the marvelous District 4 Congresswoman Laura Gillen.
Thank you, President Koser. Thank you, Hofstra, for hosting all of us here today. Thank you to Hofstra Public Safety and Nassau County Police who are here to keep us safe. And thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of you for joining us here today. We are so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with all of you. Obviously, many of you have called our offices or have reached out to the Congressman Suozzi or to my office to talk about your concerns. There are many concerns that folks have. Today we're here focusing solely on talking about the budget, because there's a lot of misinformation and information out there, and we want to try to do what we can to break it down in a factual, not a partisan way, a factual way for all of you here. And I'd like to start by thanking some of our speakers that we brought here today to talk about the potential impact to this county and to the people who live here. So we have Northwell Health CEO Michael Dowling. AHRC Sketcher Perry. Conservation Voters President Julie Todd. Island Harvest President Randy Schugan-Dresner. We also have with us Kristen Thomas. Kristen is a former IRS employee who was abruptly let go during the layoffs at the Hofstra IRS office. And as you may not be able to tell, because she looks fabulous, she's 7 months pregnant. So we are also going to be joined by a camp anchor president, board member rather, Susan Cuccio, who's going to talk. She's right here in the first row, and she's going to talk about the real fears within the special needs community by some of the proposed cuts in this budget. So I'm so impressed that all of you took the time on a Saturday to come here to listen to us speak about this budget. Tom and I had talked about doing this when I was town supervisor. I think I was the first town supervisor ever to do a budget roadshow. Because there's so many people who don't understand how their tax dollars are spent, what the budget process looks like. And so I went throughout the town of Hempstead and I conducted this budget roadshow. And most people were very happy to listen and to get an understanding of how it happens. So Tom and I spoke a little bit, I should say Congressman Suozzi and I spoke a little bit about doing that very same thing here. But we called on such short notice because we didn't know if the budget was going to pass or not. It was called for a vote on Tuesday, it was left open, they sent us home, we went home, and then they called us all back, and then it passed. But in just such a short time, I think we had over 1,000 RSVPs, so thank you for joining us here today. As many of you may know, Congressman Suozzi and I from our prior roles in local government, we are very much in favor of cutting costs, of reducing taxes. Under my administration, for the first time, a deliberative, humane, coherent, and it must be done with the thoughts of the constituents that you represent. So I'm very honored to be representing your 4th Congressional District. And I'm very honored to work with Congressman Suozzi to go about trying to fight for the people in this district. I grew up here. I love this place. The reason I got involved in government is because I want Nassau County to be a place where my children want to come back, where they can actually afford to live. And that is getting more difficult every day. So, this is why, in just a snapshot, this budget is bad for Nassau County. Again, we hear a lot about tax cuts and deficits. We have a huge federal deficit. We are on a fiscal cliff. But this budget doesn't help our deficit, it actually increases our deficit. It adds $3 trillion to the deficit. There's no promise that we're going to get our full salt deduction back. But it calls for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts over 10 years. And part of that is going to be paid for by a contemplated $2 trillion in spending cuts. And so back to why that's going to be bad for Nassau County. First, it will force $880 billion in cuts from programs like Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, threatening the Medicaid for 170,000 people just in my district who depend on it. This includes seniors, children, people with disabilities. More than 100,000 of my constituents could be in danger of losing their health care coverage, and their health care costs could rise tens of thousands of dollars more. Once again, this proposal, Congressman Suozzi will get into the nuts and bolts of the budget process. But this budget proposal directs Energy and Commerce Department, which oversees Medicaid, to make $880 billion in cuts. And they're saying they're not going to cut Medicaid. Well, I don't see any way it is possible to make $880 billion worth of cuts without cutting Medicaid. 1 in 4 children in my district are covered by Medicaid. 2 out of 3 nursing home recipients in my district are covered by Medicaid. That's right. So this budget demands would impact our youngest and our oldest and our most vulnerable residents. Second, the bill calls for $230 billion in cuts to food assistance programs. Some of the specific programs they singled out include school breakfast and school lunch programs at schools like Valley Street, where I just went for their legislative breakfast this morning, and they are very, very much concerned about the impact this will have on their students. Third, it will raise costs for families, not lower costs for families. Some of the proposals under consideration would make it harder for families to claim the child tax credit, cut enhanced tax credits that reduce ACA premiums, and increase the payments on our student loans. As I said before, the cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act that this budget proposes would be disastrous for Nassau County and for the 4th Congressional District. Under this Republican plan, the average premium would rise by 56% next year for my constituents to purchase their health care through the Affordable Care Act. Already, on the campaign trail, one of the things I heard most was that even under the Affordable Care Act, health insurance and health care is not affordable. The cuts to Medicaid won't just impact these residents. You'll hear more from Norfolk Health's Michael Dowling on how Medicaid and other health cuts will impact local hospitals and other medical providers' ability to provide services. If hospitals are forced to limit care, that won't just be for people on Medicaid. It will touch all patients, even those with good insurance plans. Hospitals and other health providers may be forced to close. Those that remain open may have to make deep cuts to their staff. No matter who you are, the availability and quality of your health care could be impacted. I'm especially concerned on the impact of our special needs community. I worked at Camp Edgar as a volunteer, as a lifeguard, as town supervisor, expanding Camp Anchor was one of my top priorities because it is the happiest place in the town of Hempstead where people with special needs thrive and grow. And I reached out to the Camp Anchor community when this budget proposal was put forward and talked to the people there about the impact this would have on people and families living with special needs, and those impacts could be devastating. On Long Island, we face a number of environmental problems, including high levels of nitrogen in our water, widespread flooding, and legacy pollution. Cuts to the Inflation Reduction Act and other laws that are already creating jobs and making our air, our water, and our land safer will put Long Islanders at risk of environmental disaster. The budget also raises costs for homeowners by cutting tax credits that are helping thousands of Long Islanders on their energy bills. The New York League of Conservation Voters, Julie Tide, will talk to us about the impact that the cuts will have on our air, land, and water on Long Island. The Republican budget, as I mentioned, also sets the stage for deep cuts to SNAP, directing the Department of Agriculture to cut the program by nearly 25%. That means it'll be harder for Long Island's veterans to put food on their table. It means struggling working families, even those with young children, may have to choose between paying their rent or going hungry. Nearly 30,000 of my constituents will be impacted by these cuts, but the impact doesn't stop there. SNAP helps grow our regional economy. The USDA found that every dollar spent through the program generates $1.54 in economic activity. We'll hear firsthand from Island Harvest President and CEO Randy Schuber-Dresner, who will speak about how these drastic cuts will deepen food insecurity for Long Island's most vulnerable citizens: children, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families. It is, again, my honor and my privilege to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. I'm ready to work on the things that matter most to my constituents: taking on the cost of living crisis that we face, strengthening access to health care, cutting taxes for the middle class and the working class. This doesn't do any of that. Instead, it raises costs for working families. It threatens children and seniors' health care. This is unacceptable. I was proud to stand up for Nassau County by voting no, and I'll continue to call out the impact that this disastrous proposal will have on my constituents. So I'm going to turn over the mic now to Congressman Suozzi. He will be walking you through the budget process so you can understand how this will work and what the situation is right now in terms of these cuts. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your Saturday afternoon to be here with us. Tom's staff and my staff is here. We're ready to help you with any problems you have, and we encourage you to reach out to our office and know that we are here for you. Thank you all.
Okay, let's say thank you to Laura Gillen. And let's thank all of our panel speakers that are here today. Thank you, all of you. Laura, I represent the Peace of Queens and Peace of Suffolk. For the peaceful people in Queens and Suffolk, we're here for you guys also. So, listen, everybody's freaking out. Yeah. Everybody's like, you know, I'm just like, let's work together, let's try and find a common ground. And what happened in the White House yesterday, I was so pissed off. We got a lot more work to do. We got a tremendous amount of work to do. And what we're doing here today is an official thing. This is being done by our official office, not our campaign offices. And our goal today is to educate people as to what's going on, so you can go out and educate your friends and neighbors as to what's going on. Because this is serious business. This is really serious business that's going to affect real people's lives in very serious, serious ways. And we have to pick and choose how we're going to conduct ourselves to educate people about the facts and reality of what's going on and how this is going to change their lives. So we're all hopped up, I understand that, okay? And I always try to say, you know, like, hey, we work together. I'm hopped up. But we got to educate people. We have to educate people as to what's really going on. Okay, so I'm going to take about 9 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to each of our speakers. They're each going to take about 5 minutes each, okay? And our goal is to try and do this as efficiently as possible, okay? So let's, this very nice picture of let's go to the first screen. How am I going to do this? Do I have I'm operating it? No. Okay, first, thank you, Hofstra University. Do it there? Okay. Heads up around the world. We want to thank all our staff. We turn this around in a week, okay? We want to thank Hofstra for helping us out. We want to thank our speakers for doing this. We want to thank all of you. It's a very big logistics night. We actually have an overflow room. I don't know if people are going in already. We're happy that people got by 3 o'clock all in into the room. We had 1,100 RSVP that I cut off the RSVPs last night because we didn't have enough room. Because the room only holds, but I don't say it only holds. Okay, fiscal year 2024. Okay, right now we're fiscal year 2025. Fiscal year 2024, the revenues to the federal government were $4.9 trillion, mainly coming from taxes, income taxes, a little bit from corporate taxes, a lot from payroll taxes, which goes to pay for your Social Security, Medicare. $4.9 trillion in revenues. Spending, $6.75 trillion in spending. That's why we have deficits. We're spending more than we're bringing in the federal government. Deficits are a real problem that is worse than it's ever been in our country's history. I remember, I'm 62 years old, I remember the 80s and the 90s. Bill Clinton actually was the only president to actually balance the budget and have a surplus. And he had, the only government that ever actually balanced the budget was under the Clinton administration with Gore, and they did a thing called reinventing government. They reduced the size of the workforce, but they did it over a period of time, mainly focusing on attrition, when high-level people left, and not refilling those positions, and using technology and consolidation. What they're doing now, I believe, is mean-spirited, chaotic, makes no sense at all. If you look at the fact that they fired the people responsible for overseeing the nuclear stockpile, and then they brought them back, but the problem was they couldn't find them all because they canceled them from having a government email, so they couldn't find out a way to contact them. They fired the people responsible for monitoring the avian flu in the middle of an avian flu epidemic. They fired the people who were responsible for the measles outbreak down in Texas and New Mexico. And they bring people back. I mean, there's so many things that are just so cavalier. It's such a it's disrespect for what government really does. Now, is there waste, fraud, and abuse? Absolutely. As Laura pointed out when she was supervisor executive, I reduced the workforce by about 15%, 18%, but it was over a period of years. Again, with a plan as to how to do it, without laying anybody off, but through attrition and not replacing people, 8,500 people down to 7,000 people. So this can be done, but it's got to be. This is all. I think this is all done for show, quite frankly. This is not really real life, because when you look at the numbers, there's already a $1.8 trillion deficit in 2024. All right, go to the next slide. U.S. House of Representatives. Okay. Fiscal year 2024. Okay, go ahead. Went from October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. Fiscal year 2025, October 1st, 2024 to September 30th of 2025. Okay, that's the year. It's not a calendar year, it's a fiscal year. Okay? So far, Congress has failed to pass a budget for fiscal year 2025. Now, it started the beginning of October. We still do not have a budget for 2025. So, Congress passed what are called, this is very confusing, so I just want you to try and be patient. Congress passed what's called a continuing resolution, or they often call it a CR, continuing resolution, to fund the government first from October 1st to December 20th. Remember that whole big debate? Trump said, I don't want to increase, get rid of the debt limit and stuff like that. Keith Jeffrey said, hell no, and we actually defeated that. There's three ways to fight back: legislation, litigation, mobilization. That was one example of legislation that we were successful in stopping something that they were trying to do early on. Okay. Then Congress passed another CR to fund the government from December 20th, 2024 to March 14th, 2025. Now, can you see that on the screen? March 14th, 2025. That's a major day. That's when the government runs out of money. And the Republicans, we don't think they're going to be able to have the votes to hold their people together because they're kind of all over the place. So if they can't hold them together, they're going to have to come to the Democrats to try and keep the government on. So that's either, so let's go to the next slide. So we're either going to, so on March 14th, we're running out of money unless we pass another short-term continuing resolution. We pass a long-term continuing resolution to September 30th, and a lot of us don't like that idea. Or we reach a deal to actually fund the government for 2025. That's the budget. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces as to what's going on. I saw people saying that, don't let the government shut down and play those guys. And there's other people who say, well, we're going to get something out of it. That's a lot of complicated stuff going into what's going to happen with that. All right, go to the next one. So there's something different, though. It's called reconciliation. You've been hearing about this on television. Who's heard of reconciliation before? Okay. On Tuesday, they passed this disastrous, I believe, reconciliation bill. If you'll notice, it was 217 yeses. They were all Republicans. There was 215 no's, one Republican, a guy named Tom Massey from Kentucky, who know a lot of stuff. And all the Democrats voted no, including Laura and I. Okay, let's go. Now, what is budget reconciliation? It's not actually the budget. What passed the other night is not the budget. It was, go to the next thing. It doesn't fund the government. It's not the budget. It only, go back. Only instructions to fund the government over the next 10 years. So the House will pass that, and hopefully the Senate will pass something, and they're going to negotiate, and they're going to lay out their framework as to what's happening. Now, under the budget deals with that, not supposed to increase the deficit as part of this reconciliation process. Okay, very important factor as to what's supposed to be happening. Why? Why are we doing a budget reconciliation? What's so special about a budget reconciliation? Why are they going through all these hoops to do a budget reconciliation? Because only requires 50 votes in the Senate, not the normal 60 votes. So you still need a majority in the House, but you only need a majority in the Senate. You don't need the 60 votes that you normally need. So what are they trying to do as part of this reconciliation process? And reconciliation has been used more and more over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years at most. People have been using it more and more. And it's supposed to be like you reconcile little nits and nats in the budget. Now it's this big whole thing that is being used. Okay. So at a glance, this is the first focus on the first piece. 4.5 trillion in tax cuts. Okay? We hear about deficits. But this is going to be $4.5 trillion in reduced revenues. Because if you reduce the taxes on the corporations and the individuals, you reduce your revenue. Okay, so 4.5 trillion in reduced revenues. Well, what about on the expense side? They're talking about 1.5 trillion in spending cuts, but they're to very, as you're going to hear, very important programs. So even under their plan, there's a $3 trillion increase in the deficit. Even under their plan, the people who are cutting Doge and this, $3 trillion increase to pay for the tax decrease. So it doesn't, and these cuts, They're never going to do the whole 1.5 trillion cuts because, as you're going to hear in a few minutes, they're crazy. They're going to destroy people all over America. They'll never happen. And one of the ways to stop it from happening is for the people to be educated and to educate other people, both here and your friends elsewhere, as to what's really happening. Okay, go ahead. So it increases the deficit dramatically. Okay, even this guy Tom Massey, who voted no on the budget, he said, if the Republican budget passes, the reconciliation budget, the deficit gets worse, not better. And Elon Musk, Mr. Cutter, the chainsaw, oh, that's not bad. I gotta tell you one thing, I gotta just bring up this one thing. Did you see the clip yesterday when the guy asked Zelensky, what, you don't have a suit? Yes. So that's Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend. Okay, asked that question. And why he's a reporter, I don't know. Okay? And he said, why did you have a suit? He comes to, oh, where was even on Elon Musk? That's purely official. Now this is very important, okay? Number one, slashes healthcare at hospitals and nursing homes. Number two, cuts clean air and water programs, raises energy costs. Increases food insecurity. Cuts education and hurts schools. And more. There's so many different things. There's so many different things that people are affected in real life ways. Okay, so let's look at it. On the right-hand side, this is how they're going to reduce, no, that's an increase the deficit, right? We've typed that wrong. Julia. It should say increase the deficit, okay? On the right-hand side, Ways and Means, 4.5 trillion on the Ways and Means Committee. Ways and Means increase, going to increase the deficit by $4.5 trillion because they are cutting taxes. They're saying, oh, we're going to give more money to armed services, we're going to give more money to the judiciary, we're going to give more money to Homeland Security, because those are our issues. But there's $4.8 trillion in spending or in reduced revenues that are going to increase the deficit. It should say increases, not reduces on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, where it says reduce the deficit, these are the cuts they're proposing. So it's all done by committee. Okay? Each committee and jurisdiction has things. So there's Energy and Commerce, $880 billion. That's for Medicaid. It's the main thing where Medicaid is funded out. That's for Medicare is funded out. So there's no possible way, when they say, oh, we're not going to touch Medicaid, we're not going to touch, it's impossible to find $880 billion in cuts through the Energy and Commerce Committee without touching those programs. There's not enough money, all the other things combined under that committee jurisdiction to find a way to do that. I'm speaking too long. What time is that? Okay, education and workforce, $330 billion. That's everything from aid to different schools, that's the Pell Grants, that's the, whatever you can think of related to education, that is part of the program. As a matter of fact, I have a bunch of notes here that I could read, but I'm not going to do it because it's going to take too long. I have all kinds of notes, similar to what Laura was talking about on the first one on Medicaid. 644,000 Long Islanders are covered by Medicaid, including 226,000 children and 108,000 seniors. 58,000 people get the Affordable Care Act. 305,000 people that are low-income people. This is where they get their health insurance from. ACA is like a little bit higher than poverty people. And then about 133 people who are disabled. They're disabled people. That's where they get their health care from. And then about, I was surprised at that. I didn't know it was big, but it was big. 2/3 of the people in nursing homes are funded by Medicaid. 2/3. So, there's more stuff here. I can't take too long. Okay, cuts environmental programs. Okay, $800 billion in clean energy tax credits. New York, my district alone, has got like $21 million in savings from that. We're going to cut the clean water programs. Helping the water districts that have a big problem with their water, that we're having PFAS and other chemicals that we've never thought of before that we have to take out of the water. It's going to cost a lot of money. We can't afford for our rates or our taxes to go up on Long Island. We need this federal help to pay for this stuff. They're jeopardizing stuff for clean air, clean water funding for transportation infrastructure, drinking water, home energy efficiency, electric buses, increases food insecurity, SNAP, which is food stamps. 75,000 people, 75,000 households on Long Island use SNAP, including, Randy will talk more about the food stability. Okay, education, Pell Grant, higher education assistance, and more. Cutting stuff for veterans, cutting stuff for, I mean, we can talk about every single program you can think of. They're going to be affected by this. Okay, so I'm just trying to illustrate for you that this is really serious business. And it'll become more apparent when you hear about our different speakers talk about this. Okay, let's go to the next one. Who's at the end? Don't count on me to do this. No. What's next? Okay, this is the March 14th, the government runs out of funding for the expiration of the continuing CR. This is the process for reconciliation. I'm not going to go through the details of it, but there's going to be a lot of steps. The passed, and I talked about it earlier. Yeah, the House passed it, now the Senate has to pass it, they're going to negotiate it, then it goes back to each of the committees, and they have to go find where to cut on different government programs for their committees of jurisdiction. And I think there's one more after this. Okay, now. Okay. The next speaker we have is really a major guy. Okay, we're very fortunate to have him here speaking today. He's been in healthcare for 42 years. He was the former Commissioner of Health and Human Services for all of New York State. And he's really transformed Northwell into really a remarkable institution that is the state of New York's largest employer. And he's, on top of everything else, he's a very, not only intelligent and capable, but a very compassionate man who really wants to help people and try to make the world a better place to live in. We're very fortunate that he served in this position. Let's hear it from Mike Dow.
Thank you very, very much. As you can tell, Suozzi, Congressman Suozzi, he's a kind of shy guy. You know? He's very uncomfortable in front of the microphone. Okay. But I just want to say, first of all, it's great to see so many people here, because who we have here are people who care. Because we've got to care about our communities and what is happening. This is no time for people to be standing on the sidelines. We've got to be active. We've got to know the facts. We can't be doing what other people do. It's attack, attack, attack. We got to defend, and we got to be dealing with reality. We got to understand what is really going on. So I want to say special thanks to Tom and obviously to Laura Gillen for their leadership on this. And we're very, very, very fortunate that we have people like Laura and Tom in Congress. We need more people like Laura. Now, I just want to be pretty brief, but as Tom mentioned, I spent a lot of time in government myself. I was in government for 12 years. So I have participated in doing state budgets. I've been doing budget battles. I've been there. And there are always tough decisions, because we're always trying to make sure that you be as efficient as you possibly can. But you also have to be very careful to understand that budgets are not just about numbers. And it gets very confusing. And all of us are involved in this on a day-to-day basis, especially what's going on with continuing resolutions. It is very confusing. But you know, the base of it all is very simple. It's about people. And it's about people's lives. And just think of it over the last couple of weeks. The numbers of people whose lives have been changed forever. Summarily fired, let go, given moments' notice, sometimes no notice. And it's important to understand that, yes, we've all been in these situations, but there has to be a little bit of humanity behind it. Because you're talking about kids, you're talking about rents, you talk about mortgages, you talk about college education. There has to be an element of decency with how you do these things. And you can do tough things, but if you're decent in the way you do them, it'll be easier to get people to understand. But when you combine bad numbers with indecency and a lack of respect and a lack of humanity, it is even worse. So, unfortunately, that's what we're experiencing. And so let me just throw out a few simple numbers to you. And focus on Medicaid. As Tom mentioned, we're a very big employer. We're the largest employer in New York. And we're the biggest provider of healthcare. And we try to do what's right almost all the time. And I believe we succeed most of the time. Medicaid is huge. It is the largest insurance program in the country, Medicaid. Let me tell you what's covered by Medicaid. And these are New York State statistics. 43% of all children in New York State get their insurance and medical coverage through Medicaid. 43%. 53% of all babies born in New York State are covered by Medicaid. 53% of all babies born. Tom mentioned the following, but it's worth repeating. 72% of all nursing home residents, their insurance is covered by Medicaid. So when you walk by a nursing home, 72% of all the people in those nursing homes, Medicaid is what covers it. 37 to 40% of all people who go to emergency rooms or clinics are covered by Medicaid. Mental health. And we are the second largest providers of mental health in New York State, behind Health and Hospitals Corporation in the city, the public hospital system. We lose in providing mental health well over $130 million a year. Yet we're expanding Medicaid, expanding mental health services because there's a phenomenal growth in the need for mental health, especially among young people. Most of it is paid for through Medicaid. So you decided that you're going to put a number out there of $860 billion of a cut in Medicaid. Who gets affected? Children. People in nursing homes. People who go to emergency rooms and clinics. Babies being born. People who drastically and terribly need mental health services. That's who gets affected. That's the consequence of bad budgets. That's what we got to worry about. We get confused with the numbers. But behind every number is a breathing person with responsibilities, obligations, and will have family that depend upon them. So what happens as these budget cuts, if they can go into effect? You're going to have less access. You'll have more uninsured. And by the way, we're very fortunate in New York. We have one of the lowest uninsurance rates in the country. But you cut the biggest insurance program that assures people have coverage, you're going to increase the number of people uninsured. People who will get sick, as we all do, need to get care and want to have access to the insurance coverage to pay for it. Now, hospitals, like the ones I have, we take care of everybody that comes in. And we at Northwood are in a little bit of a better position than other places, although the effect is negative if you're in a better position than most. But think of the safety net hospitals. Think of Nassau University Medical Center. Think of Mamali's in Brooklyn. Think of Wyckoff in Queens and Brooklyn. We work with all of them. Most of their payments come through Medicaid. 90%, 85 to 90% of their budgets are Medicaid. And Medicaid is the lowest, it provides the lowest payment, so you lose on every Medicaid patient you take care of. But let's assume you cut, you're going to lose more. So some of those hospitals that are on the edge, and we've not trying to help them, they will not be able to survive. When they can't survive, people in those communities that live around them have no access. That's the human toll. But you know, Medicaid is only one of the things that we now have to worry about. Tom mentioned quite a number of other things like climate change. If we don't take care of the environment, bad water, bad air adds to the need for more healthcare. That's a healthcare issue. We also didn't get worse and healthcare is needed most, and you cut the programs that provide the services that helps people after they're being negatively affected. It's all like a vicious circle. Okay? Now, one other thing I mentioned, because I know we have other speakers here, and they also, in the last couple of weeks, decided to drastically reduce the amount of money provided to all research institutions for research. Now, we have a huge research entity at Norfolk, and we work very closely with Hofstra University, the medical school that we do together. Those cuts that they propose, if they're left to stand, dramatically affects about 50 of our labs, about 3,000 of our researchers, makes it difficult for us to continue discovering new treatments and new protocols, and makes it very, very difficult for us to continue to educate future scientists. You know, we're all about making sure that tomorrow is better than today. New discoveries, new treatments, doing things differently, etc. And I won't even talk about what we have to be careful about over the next couple of months and years, and the tendency and the perspective that people in leadership now have about the fact that vaccines may not matter. Just think of what, you reduce the utilization, the vaccination rates, which are going down. Who thought we would have another measles outbreak? Imagine what's happening overseas, where we now don't get the data from the World Health Organization about the things that are happening around the world, that we get the data on what we used to all the time to tell us about how to prepare for things that are happening elsewhere that we have to plan for in advance here before it gets here. That's what we're on. So, I conclude with this. Budgets are more people. And there's always difficulty in budgets. Never easy, I've been there. But what we're seeing today is a lack of caring about the potential impact of what their actions mean. And when you don't care, let me put it the other way. Americans who live in America care. Those who don't care, leave your people.
I was hearing a lot from my constituents who are in the special needs family community. And so we are going to be hearing today from Stanford Perry, who is the president and CEO of AHRC Nassau County. AHRC is the largest organization exclusively serving people with intellectual and developmental disabilities on Long Island. And we're also going to hear from Susan Puccio, who is a member of the Camp Anchor Program Fund, and a parent of a son with autism. So Susan, if you would come up and join us again, please.
Thank you, Congresswoman Gillen, and I'd like to thank Congressman Suozzi for the invitation to join with others here today to speak about the impact of the Medicaid cuts on people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I think, first of all, it is important to understand the differences of people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. These are people who often are born with chronic, long-term impairment, and it is diagnosed prior to the age of 22 in New York State. An intellectual or developmental disability impacts the person's life in every possible way. For the long term and in an indefinite manner, their functionality and their ability to thrive and to do well in our communities, they will always typically need functional supports. There needs to be staff available to assist and provide the necessary supports to ensure that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities receive the support that they need. Typically, diagnoses like autism, which, by the way, 1 in 33 people born in New York State have a diagnosis of autism. The growth rate has been alarming. Cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Prader-Willi, and other neurological impairments are the people that we support at HRC Nassau as one of the largest intellectual disability service networks in the country. It is also important to point out that our collective workforce of thousands of individuals that support people with disabilities rely on Medicaid as well to ensure that the needs of people who are disabled are indeed met. Medicaid is the primary payer of long-term services and supports for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. 99% of our budget comes from Medicaid dollars. So when federal Medicaid cuts happen, it shifts the cost to New York State. And in shifting the cost to New York State, the federal match, that's the amount of money that the state receives from the federal government to match what New York State is paying, is reduced. When that match is reduced from the federal government, there has to be another mechanism to pay for those services. Where will New York State get the dollars when the federal government cuts their match? And because New York State will not have the billions of dollars necessary to provide those supports, people go without it. Waiting lists get longer. The therapies that people need to live, the physical therapy, the speech therapy, all of the other therapies that are necessary for people to live quality lives are then removed. And people who need to be in programs like HRC, like Camp Anchor, are sitting at home, waiting, as they are in many other states, to receive services way longer than they should be. We must preserve Medicaid to ensure that people with disabilities lead a quality life. In closing, I will share that HRC Nassau and the countless number of agencies throughout the state of New York, hundreds of them, rely on Medicaid as an essential support, and we cannot endure these cuts. It is our financial responsibility and stewardship to provide supports for the most vulnerable population in New York State. And when agencies like HRC Nassau can no longer do that, people with disabilities end up in hospitals, in nursing homes, and at home with family members not receiving the level of care that they deserve. We fully support fiscal responsibility, and I want to be clear about that. We fully believe in fiscal transparency and responsibility. What we don't understand is how cutting services to people with disabilities somehow equals responsibility. One has nothing to do with the other. Must be built into the process, and just as we hold ourselves accountable, we expect the federal government to also hold itself accountable. I want to again thank Congressman Suozzi and Congresswoman Gillen for inviting us to be a part of this forum, and we need your commitment, all of our commitments, to ensure that we understand how these cuts will impact people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. A lot of heavy thoughts going in this room. So I'm going to start off with saying how lucky I am, okay? I am a very lucky lady. I have 3 wonderful children, adult children, all brilliant and intelligent. One who works for Mr. Dowling, one who is sitting here today, my daughter, and my youngest son, who's going to be 34 tomorrow, is one of the autistic people. And he is a camper of Camp Anchor since he's 6. The wonderful thing, if you don't know what Camp Anchor is, I just got to give my commercial and I have to educate all of you as Town of Hempstead residents. We are so lucky in the Town of Hempstead to have a program like Camp Anchor. It's unprecedented. The fact that 55 years ago, our town had the foresight to realize that people with developmental disabilities needed a place. And our other children were going to camps, and they needed to replicate that for our special needs children. And so I am the president of the nonprofit. And what makes it so unique is we have a municipality like the Town of Hempstead that funds a lot of money to this program. And then we have the parent arm and the nonprofit arm that work hand in hand to enhance that program. And it is, I am proud to say, it has grown leaps and bounds, and it is a program that all of us should be extremely proud of today. When Congresswoman Gillen called me this week and asked me, what are you hearing? She texted me early in the week, what are you hearing? Are people afraid? We have a we have a Facebook page, and I'm starting to see a little bit of chatter. And of course, I go to my posse, my group of special needs moms. Some people may call us a coven. But I ask them, what are you most worried about? What are you hearing about? A lot of them, I'll be honest, didn't seem too worried because they're believing the nonsense on the other side, which really breaks my heart in a lot of ways. But I have to say, our entire home and community-based system for our children is dependent on the Medicaid waiver for funding. And the states are not going to be able to afford these services without this federal funding. We're all aware that the service system we have right now is struggling terribly with this current funding. So cutting it is absolutely going to be devastating. What keeps me up at night is a million things, but what keeps me up at night this week, what's the impact going to be on the nonprofits? What's the impact going to be on the day habs and the community habs that I rely on for my son, Life's Work, ACLD, AHRC, FREE. We rely on these agencies to give our 21-year-old plus loved ones meaningful, new, skill-building, pre-vocational socialization, and community interaction experiences. The impact on this funding, what's it going to be to our DSPs? A lot of us are also self-directed now. We have direct service professionals. We need to provide them with better training. We need to make this job more desirable, make it a respected profession for these people, because they are the frontline people working with our loved ones. They're taking care of their safety and their well-being. We want to make sure that there's the impact on the broader community and the economy, because when you cut services to the disabled, like my son and younger children, you're cutting their parents' ability to go to work, and therefore the economic stability is threatened across all the lines. The impact on food assistance and SNAP. A lot of our disabled adults live independently or in supported apartments and tremendously depend on SNAP, which is just going by the wayside. And so we need more legislation similar to what we have, PL 94-142, which I don't even know what that is, to the adult developmentally disabled, so that along with legislation would come the guaranteed right of each of our disabled adults to receive appropriate services. It would need to make their life plan, which we do every year. We sit and make a life plan for our adult children, a legal document that's financially backed and executed. So advocates, guardians, parents must have legal recourse if these services aren't provided. There is a tsunami of special needs. You just said the incidence of autism is now 1 in 33. When Matthew was first diagnosed at age 3, it was 4 in 10,000. So in 30 years, I can't even, I'm terrible now, so I can't figure out what that is, okay? So there we go. There's a tsunami of adults, Asian adults like me, who are worried because my son is going to continue to live long after I'm gone. And this comes my lucky part. I'm very lucky for him to have a brother and a sister who I know will always love and worry about him. But they don't need that whole burden too. I want to go away knowing that he will be provided for. And I'm trying my hardest on my own to provide as much as my husband and I can. But a lot of our services are tied up with the government. So thank you all for listening. You're just listening to the Reverend Armand.
In this room that were fired from a federal government job?
Right here.
Are there any people here who have a parent or a relative in a nursing home? Anybody that has someone in a group home? Anybody that knows someone who is affected by Medicaid? This is real life. This is real life stuff. And if you want to know what someone's values are, look at the budget. What do you believe in? What are you going to fund? $4.5 trillion in tax cuts for people that really don't need them. Not all of it, but a big portion of it. While trying to cut some of these vital services for people. Okay, I'm in trouble because we're going longer than we're supposed to. I spoke about myself, probably. So I'm going to try and keep it going, okay? Next, I want to bring up Julie Ty. Julie Ty has been doing environmental work for the past 18, almost 20 years. And she's the former Chief of Staff and Assistant Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs for the New York State DEC. She's got a great educational background in science and health and public health and the environment. And she is now the president of the New York League of Conservation Voters. Let's hear it for Julie Ty.
Hi, thanks everybody for being here today. Thank you so much. educated about what's going on? Anybody here like clean air? Anybody here like clean water? I really appreciate what Dr. Dowling said about the fact that climate change, as we get more climate change, we're going to have more health issues. But we have those health issues today. Do you know what the #1 cause of school absenteeism is? That's right, it's asthma. And that's mainly caused, a lot of it is caused by air pollution, and that's something that we can fix. But right now, this budget is threatening to undermine a program called the Inflation Reduction Act that includes billions of dollars for helping to reduce pollution and making your homes more comfortable by investing in energy efficiency programs, billions of dollars for that. In Congressman Suozzi's district alone, we know that thousands of residents took advantage of that and got $21 million in savings in energy bills. Does anyone think their energy bill's too low? Well, I can tell you this, the price of natural gas right now is really high. And we don't know what it's going to be next week, needless to say next year. But when we have clean energy sources for them, clean energy sources that are funded with the Inflation Reduction Act, right? That is something that we know is going to be stable for the next 25 years. Right? We know that because sun and wind are free. I don't know if you know this, but we can make your homes more energy efficient. In Congressman Gillen's district, we had, again, almost 10,000 people took advantage of tax credits that are available for specific programs that are saving millions of dollars on your energy bills. That I know is something that can provide real relief for families that are struggling with affordability today. Right? One of the biggest things we have here on Long Island is traffic. And we know that cars are a big source of pollution on Long Island. It's actually the biggest source of air pollution. And one of the things that the Inflation Reduction Act included was tax credits for buying electric vehicles. And Long Island is leading the charge on electric vehicles, so congratulations. We have more than anywhere else in the state. And they're proposing to axe those credits, and that has provided for the state of New York over $100 million in savings on buying these vehicles, so that people can make that decision to make the change. We talked about water infrastructure. We all know Long Island cares about water, I think more than the entire rest of the state does. You're very aware our water is beneath our feet, right? We have in this state about $80 billion in water infrastructure needs. Right? That's real money, which can also turn into real jobs when people are upgrading the infrastructure. We have lead pipes still on our ground that we need to remove. Those are at risk. There's funding for that now, but we don't know if there's going to be more. Wastewater infrastructure, like Interdistrict, I spent a lot of time working on the plants in Long Beach when I was at TDC. That's something that we need to make sure all of our wastewater treatment systems are upgraded, right? And we know on Long Island, we have the problems with emerging contaminants, things we never heard of before, like PFAS and 1,4-dioxane, that are putting people at risk, putting their health at risk when we're drinking that. We need to get funding to do this from the federal government. The state and the local governments cannot do it alone. We need to make sure that everyone is coming together to make that happen. So I'm really glad that we have fighters like Laura Gillen and Tom Suozzi in Congress. We're going to make sure that we're protecting the funding for the environment, because everybody, no matter your political stripe, deserves clean air and clean water.
As we've heard throughout the presentation today, the neediest among us are the ones who are going to be hurt most. Our next speaker is Randy Schubendresner, who is the CEO of Island Harvest Food Bank since 2001. She oversees the distribution of over 20 million pounds of nutritious food each year, which goes to over 220,000 neighbors in need within the Long Island community. Randy, would you please join us?
I'm sort of on cleanup, so I'll be respectful of your time. But I'm going to repeat something that's really important that was said before. Budgets are not just about dollars and numbers. They're about people. And food is a right that we all have. Island Harvest Food Bank is the largest hunger relief organization on Long Island. And as Congresswoman said, we're distributing 20 million pounds of food across Long Island. And if we go back just a few years, in 2019, we were distributing 9.8 million pounds of food. That's the increase that we've seen. And so 221,000 people are depending on our food that we're distributing, but also on the services that we provide. And so what I'd like to do is paint a picture of the people who are most vulnerable on Long Island. And in some cases, the people who are coming to the food bank for support are also going to the hospitals and some of the services at AHRC and some of the other great organizations across Long Island. And so we have a very important program called Operation Hope. And Operation Hope is where we have a veteran on staff who is helping our veterans across Long Island who are food insecure. Now that should be an oxymoron. A veteran who is food insecure, but we delivered food to a veteran who was crying when we handed him the box of food. And why? Because we learned he'd been eating a can of corn every day because that's all he had access to. And so we also have a program called the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. This happens to be a federally funded program which is funded through the state. We're awarded a contract to be the sole provider of this program on Long Island. And this is a program who is supporting senior citizens with an income of less than $1,638 a month. Imagine surviving on that and having to pay rent for medicines, transportation to get to doctors, and also for food. And so in this program, our contract is awarding us up to 8,000 senior citizens a month. Right now, we're at a level of 5,000 senior citizens. And what we know about this program, we have some additional funding that is now frozen. And so it's the expansion of this program is on hold so that we can help additional senior citizens. And what we know is that when our volunteers and our staff are delivering to these 5,000 senior citizens each month, many of them have not seen or talked to another person other than our volunteer or our staff person. They're dependent on us for help. Because there are a lot of senior citizens that don't have family nearby or friends who can help them. And then we have general programs which help people through other programs. We have a summer feeding program which supports children who are struggling to find food over the summer. And during the school year, they are entitled to the school lunch, school breakfast program. But again, when we talk about food, food is a right that we all have. It's not a benefit, it's a right that we all have. And so these are important programs. And right now, Island Harvest is concerned because we have $2 million right now that's frozen. And we know that there are 17 programs that we provide for our neighbors in need across Long Island that are at risk, amounting to well over $6.4 million. Well, if that money is gone, we can't afford to make up that funding in any other way. And New York State, who is dedicated to helping people who are struggling with food insecurity, certainly can't make up for all of the funding that we will lose at Island Harvest and at AHRC and a lot of the other programs across Long Island that are so dependent on support from the federal government. And so what we're saying is we can't solve a budget crisis at the risk of our most vulnerable neighbors. And the people who are dependent on our support are our most vulnerable neighbors and our relatives and our friends. And so the people in school, the children in school who sit next to our children and our grandchildren are receiving food from Island Harvest. The senior citizens that live next to the people that you know or even next to you are dependent on the food from Island Harvest Food Bank. And the family, who you may not realize is really struggling to make ends meet, who know that they don't have a savings, and so if their car breaks down this month, then they have to make some tough choices because they may not be able to afford 3 meals a day for their children. And so food becomes a fungible thing. We eat 3 meals a day and we snack in between. Many of us talk about being hungry, but the true pangs of hunger are when children go to sleep at night without having eaten dinner. And they go to school because they know they're going to be getting a meal at school, and I've heard people tell me that. People who become adults after having lived through that as a child. We know that people need the support from the federal government. We know that people need support from all of us, and it's important that we remember the faces of the people who will be impacted by quick decisions and not thought through decisions about where to cut and how to cut. We need to make sure that everybody is aware, and people say to me, well, what can I do? How can I help? We always talk about 4 things. Certainly you could contribute. Certainly you could do a food drive and raise some food and help us. Certainly you can help make connections with us with large food retailers. But one of the most important things that we speak about is to know that there's an issue of food insecurity right next door, and to know and to speak about it, and let people know that here on Long Island, where we have some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country, Island Harvest Food Bank and our partners are helping over 221,000 people. It's nearly 10% of our citizens here on Long Island. And so I'm grateful to Congressman Suozzi and Congresswoman Gillen, and also to Dr. Poser for hosting us today, and to all of you who are here. Many of you are supporters of Island Harvest. I recognize your face, and I know that you're there and that you support us. And we appreciate that, and we ask you to not stop. Continue to talk about issues of food insecurity, of people with disabilities, and of others that need our help, and stay with us and help us and support us. Thank you so much.
Okay, one last speaker. It's real people. Okay, it's not just a headline, it's not just a tweet, it's not just something on Facebook. Our next speaker is a real life person who graduated from college, worked all kinds of different jobs, finally got a job from the federal government as an IRS correspondent. When people file their tax returns, and they put in for deductions for certain things, then the examiner says, oh, I'm not sure about this thing, we have to see if where this is from. She's got to go out and find out that it's actually true that it happened that way. And has to reach out to the taxpayers and talk to them. And she was excited. She had a steady job. She's still working 7 days a week, working as a waitress on top of working at the IRS. She said, her and her husband Mike said, okay, we feel comfortable, we got health insurance, we got a steady job, ready to go forward, and now she's pregnant. She's 7 months, and she's losing her health insurance. She's losing her job with no notice. So I'm going to ask Laura to come up and introduce our next speaker, but please recognize that this speaker is one of hundreds of thousands of people throughout the country that are affected already, and there will be more individual stories that will come from all these different cuts to pay for a tax reduction for some of the wealthiest people in the country. So I'm going to ask my great partner in this effort, Laura Gillen, to come up and introduce Kristen.
Congressman Suozzi and I were talking about this program, and we were thinking about we have to bring up someone who had that real life impact. And I just read a story in Newsday about the firing, the summary firings at the IRS in Holtzville. And they had a picture of a woman who was not Kristen, it was another woman who just had a baby a month and a half beforehand, and was starting her new life with her new child, and showed up and was told that she was no longer had a job. I have 4 children. When you have a job, you worry. How am I going to be able to provide for this person for the rest of my life? How am I going to be able to pay for them to go to college? How am I going to be able to pay for their care, for their child care? That's when you have a job. But to have the rug pulled out from under you, no health insurance when you're 7 months pregnant, when every single day, especially when you're that far along in your pregnancy, you need to go to the doctor all the time to make sure that everything is going the way it needs to go. You will notice, I started out this presentation saying, this is not a partisan presentation. I have no idea what political party Kristen belongs to, and I don't care. The people who are not going to get services, it doesn't matter what party they are, it doesn't matter what race they are, it doesn't matter what age they are, it doesn't matter what socioeconomic class they come from. These are our fellow Americans. These are our neighbors, our friends, our community members. What do we stand for as a nation if we don't help those who need our help, if we don't help our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors? So we want to invite up Kristen now to share her story with you, because these cuts aren't about dollars and cents, it's about human lives. We can save money, we can tighten government stuff, but we don't have to do it with a wrecking ball. Kristen, would you please do that?
Thank you so much for inviting me, both of you. I appreciate everything that has been given offered to me in any way, shape, or form of help. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kristen Thomas. I'm a hardworking, tax-paying American doing everything in my power to build a better future for my family. I work tirelessly, holding 2 jobs at a time and working 7 days a week just to make ends meet. When I was offered a position in the federal service, it was a dream come true. I saw it as a chance to finally find stability, to provide for my growing family, and to stop living paycheck to paycheck, to have health insurance, and to steady bank and build a secure foundation for my unborn daughter. But that dream was shattered when I was unfairly terminated, without warning, without a shred of consideration for the lives this decision would impact. I am 7 months pregnant, what should be a time of joy and anticipation has turned into a nightmare of uncertainty. I had been left without income, without health insurance, just weeks before giving birth. In April, I will welcome my daughter Juliana, named after my late mother, who I recently lost far too soon. 1 month earlier, on March 19th, my coverage will be gone, leaving me scrambling to find a plan that my husband and I simply cannot afford. The cost of premiums, deductibles, and labor and delivery expenses are overwhelming. Every night I lie awake, consumed with stress, wondering how I will bring my daughter into this world under these circumstances. The way that we were treated by the administration was beyond inhumane. Beginning in late January, the administration harassed employees, pressuring them to resign, take severance pay, or accept early retirement. I was told to ignore these threats and to continue working hard, and that my job was secure. I have perfect performance reviews and should have nothing to worry about, or so I thought. On the morning of February 20th, I arrived at work and was told that myself and more than 100 other employees were being terminated. Starting at 7 a.m., we sat in that building, desperate for answers. After 10 hours without information, we were told to walk out by our managers, saying our letter of termination will be mailed to us. I advocated for everyone to stay there, where they are until we get the proper documentation that we are owed, including personalized termination letters and instructions on our health insurance. I left with nothing but fear and uncertainty. It also doesn't make sense to fire us. We were doing important work. I was ordering files and returns for 2022, and we haven't even gotten to the claims for 2023 yet. With the new budget, the administration is calling for more IRS layoffs. Tax season is coming, and if they lay off more people, the work just won't get done. This is not just about me. This is about the countless other employees who have been treated as disposable. People who showed up every day, worked hard, performed well, and were still cast aside without warning. This decision did not take away just a paycheck. It took away security, stability, and dignity. It took away the future I'd worked so hard to build. I'm calling on the White House and federal leadership to hear our voices, see the human cost of these decisions. These layoffs are not just numbers on a budget report. They are real lives, real families, real decisions real futures being destroyed. Please consider the middle and lower class families working for their country who are being pushed into financial ruin overnight. We are people, not statistics. I have never been one to ask for handouts, and I've always worked for everything I have. I went to college, I have experience in legal assistance, healthcare, banking, and I've worked as a waitress since none of that is enough. But now I am asking, pleading, for someone to listen, for someone to see the injustice of what has happened, and for someone to care enough to fight for people like me. I don't want my daughter to grow up in a world where hard work and dedication mean nothing, where stability can be ripped away in an instant, and where working class families are left to struggle. I pray that she will have better opportunities than the ones that have been just taken from me. Thank you so much.
Let's hear it again for Christians and Student Service. If only we knew the CEO of the largest employer in New York State who could help with delivering babies, and Michael Cal is already going to try and help her. It's not just numbers. You know, 5% of the employees in America are veterans. 26% of the federal employees are veterans. How do you have someone that you ask to serve your country, then you encourage them to come apply for a federal job, and then you let them off?
I don't care.
Doesn't really make any sense.
They don't care.
So there's so many other things we can talk about. You have other people that have been laid off here as well that stood up earlier. There's a lot of painful things going on. There's a lot of things going on in all of your heads. We have just got to, I said this earlier today at a meeting I said earlier today, okay? I know many of you are very worried. I'm worried. We're all worried, okay? Worry is not a productive feeling. You got to figure out how to take that worry, either put it aside completely, or at least stick it somewhere in the back of your head if you can do it. And every time you get worried, you got to do something. You got to do something to try and make a difference. So, we've got 4 things that we're asking people to do, okay? 1, write letters to the editor. You say, oh, well, what does that matter? We need you to send a letter to your local paper. We need you to send a letter to Newsday. Try and get it to the New York Times as whatever you can. It's going to be very hard to do that. But definitely try and get a letter into your local paper to try and tell people about what you learned here today, or what you learned, you're feeling, or what you experienced with a personal story that you hear from people like Christians. Organize community meetings and participate in local efforts, okay? There are people involved in this stuff right now. Many of you are here involved in local organizations. Take your worry. Don't just go yell or get mad or post something on Facebook. Get involved with a group. Save your country. Third, contact your local and national officials. Now, a lot of you are doing that for us. But we're already on your side. But keep on doing it. And we want to hear from you. We really do. It's very good for us to get the information. And number 4, what's that?
They don't respond.
We respond to everything.
Not respond.
Okay, number 4, sign up for elected officials' newsletters and follow elected officials' social media accounts. A lot of stuff, I mean, we're putting stuff out every single day, but you can't get it in, I mean, the media is so fractured today, and it's very hard to find the information. Follow your local elected officials' social media pages and get on their newsletter, and you'll find out so much information about things that are going on. Go to the next one if you can. This is the way to contact our office and Gillen's office. I'm sure many of you know how to do that already. The most important thing is, don't give up hope. Okay? When I was, my kids were young, and I'll tell this the last story, and then we're going to wrap it up. I'll stick around. We'll stick around. We're going to do the thing with the press, and then we'll stick around for anybody who wants to talk, because some of our speakers have to go.
Are you taking questions?
I'm doing a town hall meeting next week, and Laura's doing one again in March meeting. Mine will be a telephone town hall, hers will be a live town hall. Okay.
Why not in person? They're accountable to us.
I'll be happy to talk to you.
In person?
I'll be happy to talk to you. You know, that's not necessary. Anyway, so, when my kids were young, we went hiking in the Wellwood Nature Preserve, up in Glen Cove. And we're walking through the woods, kids are like, 14 and 10, and we see a red-tailed hawk fly through the canopy of trees. I'm like, wow, that red-tailed, it's amazing. And then we went down to the water along Long Island Sound, and we saw an osprey dive into the water and get a fish. I was like, oh, that's amazing, look at that kid. And I thought to myself, I've been over these woods since I was a little kid, but I don't really remember seeing a red-tailed hawk or an osprey when I was a kid. And is that because I was a kid and I wasn't paying attention? Or is it because those birds weren't there? So I called up the local Audubon Society, and I said, I was born in 1962, and I used to go there in the 60s and 70s. Were those birds there back in the 60s and 70s? They said, no. They'd all been killed off by DDT. And it wasn't until Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Springs that we stopped using DDT. And the birds didn't come back right away. And then they come back in 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. But they came back. And now their population, I saw a bald eagle the other day. So my point that I'm making is things seem kind of bleak right now with the crazy things that are out of our control that are happening in Washington, D.C. But I promise you, having done this for a long time now, if you keep on working hard, you don't give up your values, you do the best you can, and you don't give up, we will make the changes necessary to make things better for the people that we represent. Thank you very much.